Development, Department of Chief Minister and Cabinet, and her topic today, the Chief Minister and Cabinet Strategic Directions. Maree to Lacey.
Apologies, I was way up the back. Good morning, everyone, and thank you to Leanne for the invitation again to come and speak with you about some of the key things that are coming up from Chief Minister and Cabinet. But firstly, I want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where we're meeting today and pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging, and also extend that respect to elders and leaders from across the Northern Territory who have joined us here today from a whole range of different places. Technology, hey?
Is it not working?
No. Firstly, turn on your machine. Okay, that's off, that's on, that's great.
Try now.
Ah. Don't we just love technology? Okay. So what I'm going to do first is just quickly talk about us, and what I will acknowledge as well is thank you to Con for allowing me to speak yesterday to the mayors and presidents for a little while, and also to Sean for allowing me to speak and interact with the CEOs, which basically means you've pretty much stolen most of my speech for today. So that's good news, because it means that I'm going to quickly cover off on a few items that we've already touched on. So you'll be aware that last year there was a machinery of government change. There is actually a verb called mobbed. We've been mobbed. Who would have known? So there was a machinery of government change, which meant that the local government and regional development team came out of the old Department of Local Government, Housing and Community Development and became part of the Chief Minister's Department. So Chief Minister and Cabinet. Now, I think that's actually a really good move in terms of putting the three spheres of government, the strategic direction in relation to how we intersect with the other two spheres of government, into the one central agency where there are a whole range of levers. But that meant a number of changes, and I just want to very quickly touch on some of those changes, in particular how they impact on us. What doesn't change is our responsibility. So the responsibility that we have in relation to the local government sector. So my part of the department, so Jodie Wright, who is the CEO, right through to my part of the department, are responsible for supporting the Minister with the administration of the Local Government Act. And you'd all be aware that we have a new act which commenced this year. So we, right through that department now, is that responsibility. And I always speak about this, the principles that underpin the Local Government Act. And the first one of those is that local government is a distinct and essential sphere of government. So it's really important that everyone recognises that this is a sphere of government like the other two, represented where elected members are elected by their communities to represent their needs and interests. And how we intersect between the three spheres of government and work together is really important in actually achieving the best interests of communities. Other underpinning principles are that it's a system of government that has to be flexible and adaptable and has to be democratic and responsive. Really important that those are the principles that underpin the Act, and everything else that flows out of the Act, everything else in the Act, comes from those principles. Anyone who's responsible for exercising a power under the Act or performing functions under the Act, which is all of us, are responsible for upholding those principles. It's a really important part of the Act to kind of just keep, in fact, I carry it with me. There you go. But it's really important. Those principles are important when you're having conversations. If you feel as though there's not an understanding of what local government actually does, it's always important to go back to those principles. Then, so just very quickly, I'm going to touch on the division, Territory Regional Growth. So Bridget Ballinger is the General Manager for Territory Regional Growth, and she was going to join me here today, but just sends her apologies, she was unable to do so. You'd all be aware there's a lot going on at the moment, and particularly in the COVID space. So she's the General Manager and I report direct to her. So those are the four parts of Territory Regional Growth. So we report through Bridget, through to Jodie Ryan. You'll see on your right-hand side, Office of Aboriginal Affairs and People and Places. So I won't go over those too much, because where I'm going to focus from now on is those parts of the department that touch most directly with the local government sector on a day-by-day basis, which is the two in blue, which is the Regional Network Group and the Local Government and Regional Development Unit. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail on this, and I'm more than happy to send it out to you so that you've got it. You can actually see who does what in the department and who you want to talk to. But fundamentally, the principle is anything that's regional, specifically regional and place-based, you're likely to be talking more with the Regional Executive Director. And each of you, right across the Northern Territory, including Darwin, Palmerston and Litchfield, has a Regional Executive Director. Anything that relates specifically to technical information about the Local Government Act, about compliance reviews or anything to do with compliance is more likely to come to us, to my team. So we hold that technical expertise in relation in particular to the Local Government Act and any other legislation relating to the local government sector. We also are the part, Local Government and Regional Development, which is my part, is the part that's responsible for the national relationships and also for the territory-wide relationships and policies. I'm just going to really touch on this very quickly. Again, just in terms of the things that you would come to us for, the things that you would go to the other team for. So again, primarily anything to do with legislation, anything to do with territory-wide policy, the territory-wide guidelines about local government grants, the relationship with Legant, all of those sit within my unit. And the regional offices are all of the matters that are place-based. So where you're talking about services locally, about coordinating how you work together locally in the regional level, and I'm hearing some great examples of how that's already happening. That goes through your regional office, or that's a relationship that you would have with your regional office. You are independent, reinforce that, but you'll have a relationship with the Regional Executive Director and the regional office. They have a regional coordination committee or a regional coordination structure, and every local government has the ability to have a seat at the table of those regional coordination structures. So I'd expect that that's probably already happening for most of you, if not all, and if it's not, just let us know. You don't have to remember all of this, because the important part of it is that my team and the regional teams work together really closely. So if you're not sure who to talk to, just talk to one of us and we'll actually point you in the right direction if it's not us. But those are the contacts, those are the contact people that you would have. You've already seen that. I think that was provided also at the symposium. Again, with any of that information, if you're not sure, we're happy to send this out. We're happy for you to have this presentation. But again, don't stress about it if you're not really sure. It is a change. It's a change for all of us. But we do work with our regional teams and we can help. So don't feel you're ever going to the wrong person. We touched on, I'm not going to go into any details on Local Government 2030 because we spent quite a bit of time talking about that yesterday. And that strategy should be circulated out to you very soon for your comment. And it's really terrific to hear that we have mayors and presidents and elected members who are keen to join the workshops, particularly around the principle-based agreement. Sustainability. The Minister has a very strong focus on this. So this is around the financial viability in particular for the local government sector and especially for those who are in the regional areas where we know that this is a real challenge. So what we're looking to is creative options as well as the pragmatic ones for how do we actually support the local government sector in building its own source revenue options and opportunities. And it's great to hear that we'll be working with Legant around that as well. There is consideration of the areas that have come through as Legant priorities. So the Minister is very keen that we explore the opportunities for dealing with the unincorporated areas, which I know is one of your priorities, and with conditional rating. So it's not something that I can actually give you any concrete information about where we're at the moment, but we would just know that these are very live and they are high priorities for the Minister. What we're also looking at is across the country, how do we actually measure and understand sustainability? So we know that it's more than just financial sustainability. We know that it includes things like governance, it includes things like asset management. So we're actually working nationally on this because we're not alone in having these challenges in the local government sector. This is something that is right across the country, and particularly in those areas where we have a range of councils in the small and more remote areas. So we're aiming that we'll have something come through that's a framework that we'll be obviously working with Legant and with you on around how do we actually look to what are the opportunities for growing sustainability. Really keen to hear your ideas, those of you who are living it. You must, and we know already from talking with some of our colleagues in councils that there are some ideas out there that we need to be listening to. Professional development I talked about yesterday, and this is mandatory training. So under the Local Government Act, for the first time in the Northern Territory, there's a requirement that all elected members participate in training around matters underpinning the Act within 12 months of being appointed. So big shout out to Roper Gulf, who was the first off the rank to actually undertake this training. But we are looking to roll it out across the Northern Territory. The way that we're doing this is to actually work with you, with your council on it, and to tailor it to your council's specific needs. And we want it to be a conversation, because that way we build the understanding, but we actually also get feedback from you about what we need to be doing in the future around mandatory training, but also makes it more logical to you. I will tell you that this is very basic training, so just understand that what we're trying to do this year is just get everyone on the same page at that kind of easier, or the basic foundations. Get the understanding clear that we know that everyone has had that training in the first round. And then in the future, because this is going to be ongoing, that will actually enable us then to get a much more sophisticated mix of training. So some of it will be more complex for those who've been around for a longer time. And we're also looking at pathways to accreditation. But we just need everyone to do this foundation at this time, but work with us and tailor it to your council. Review of the regulation model. So we've been doing the way, this is how we do the compliance and capability building roles that our department has. We've been using the same framework now for some time. There's nothing really wrong with it, but we actually know when you use something for a number of years, it's worth having a really good look at it. And there's been a whole range of changes in our operating environment. ICAC has now come into the Northern Territory, and we are a referral agency from ICAC. So if they receive allegations that relate to the local government sector, they may refer those to us. And so we're getting an increasing number of those referrals coming through. What I will say is that when we get referrals from ICAC, there are confidentiality requirements around those. So we're often not able to give you details, and I know that can be an uncomfortable space, both for councils and us. But that's a requirement in law that we're not able to give those details, at least not until the whole investigation is over, and ICAC gives us permission to do so. We've also learned examples and lessons from other states. So, for example, I've just listed a couple there. The Central Coast of New South Wales, second biggest council in New South Wales, where the department, the equivalent to my team, became aware only 2 days before that council was about to run out of money to pay their salaries that was happening. So that signalled a couple of things: a significant issue inside that council, but also that the local intelligence from the department obviously didn't pick up. So we've said this a number of times, we rely on you to tell us when things are going wrong early so that we can come alongside you and support you to actually get them right. So in that instance, what we learned is just the consequences if that doesn't work. Serious impact for that council, administrators, a lot of money spent by the New South Wales government, let alone the impact on community of that kind of thing. So that's made us pause and think we really need to be thinking about how we're doing our local intelligence. Also, WA had an Office of Auditor General review of their compliance and regulatory framework, which found that they had actually imbalanced. They'd actually swung too far to the compliance end and had put too little emphasis on the prevention end. We currently, I think, have a reasonable balance, but we don't know for sure that it is actually the right balance, because it becomes very costly. It also becomes very adversarial if we swing into just that compliance side, and the community doesn't win. The community wins more if we actually work with you in that support end to prevent things from going wrong, which is where we really want to be. So we've learned a few lessons from others. So we're actually looking at doing an independent review of our regulatory framework. And we will work with you on this because we're really keen to hear your feedback as well. There's a couple of things that I'll be, what we want to end up with is a document that's transparent, that is clear on its expectations so that you know what you can expect from us. And we also, our own team knows when we're getting referrals, how we're actually going to deal with them. So it will have a focus on support, and it will have a focus on getting that right balance around how we manage and how we decide when we're going to take that kind of compliance action, and making it clearer to you as well, so that you know when we contact you what you can expect from us. I've touched on the local authority review, so I won't go over that again, except to just emphasise how important it is. I really strongly encourage councils to have a look at the section of the Act around the local authorities. It's under a heading called Local Decision Making, which signals what government sees these local authority bodies as being. And just ask yourself the question, when you look at that section of the Act that talks about the function of local authorities, I think it's section 75, it's really about having a body that's based in the community, that has a say in the council's policies, plans, etc., and is able to communicate back to the community. So think about whether the way your council in the regions is managing your local authorities is empowering them to do that. And I know it's not easy, but that will be a really big focus because the minister's really keen on it. Burial Information Bill. So we will be, this is fundamentally the principal thing that this is trying to achieve, is to ensure that burial records are kept for future generations. This is a really important piece of work, and I know that we've already talked with many of you about this, and we're coming now. It was introduced into Parliament, then withdrawn because there was misunderstandings about the intent of the Act, in particular, whether it interfered with cultural practices and cultural rights. It was never intended to do that, but we clearly didn't communicate that well enough. So the Minister made the right decision, pull it out, and let's do some more work on it. So we've been working with a steering group made up of Legant and all 4 land councils to actually look again at the policy framework for this. What we're expecting, what we're wanting, is that this will be the first piece of legislation in Australia that deals with this sensitive area, that actually explicitly includes respect for Aboriginal cultural practice and funeral practices. It's looking at the moment, we're looking, I think it's a solid piece of legislation. What we're looking to do is to come out in early next year with a consultation draft. Really keen to work with you, and particularly with those councils where you have the regional councils, but this is something that impacts on all councils. But we're really keen to work with you. If there's someone in your community, some groups in your community who you think we need to be talking to, we're very keen to do that so that people really genuinely understand what it is we're trying to achieve with this. And we actually really appreciate the feedback we've had from you all up until now as well. If this gets through the whole process, the idea is that it commences in 2022 as well. Local government grants, just a quick overview of that. So we manage 52 million in Northern Territory government funding and also 35 million in Australian government funding that goes out to the councils. I'm not going to go through any of the detail on that because I think you all know where we're up to with all of those, except for one point. That last one, the DRFA reminder, just claps of thunder. So just, we're heading into the wet season, we're heading into the cyclone season. All of the CEOs have got correspondence about the requirements for this. So I just encourage you, all councils, to get your heads around it because it is important before we get into the cyclone season to make sure you're prepared. Boy Scout, Girl Guide, whatever it is. And finally, COVID, global pandemic. I reflect what your President has said about how important it is that we are all taking this seriously. The vaccination mandate is clearly an area where we're working with Legant, and I thank Legant for actually engaging with us in this and for their leadership. So the forum that you guys had through Legant, where we were invited to come along, was really useful for me as well in understanding all of your questions. And we work together, so Legant is actually in the lead in terms of making sure that your questions and concerns are heard and fed through the Northern Territory Government. We do the bits around ensuring that the legislation is understood, so we will have given some advice back through Legant around that as well. Just a really important area, and most of those points underneath that response relate to COVID-19. So There's a lot of communication, a lot of coordination that's happening at the regional levels, which I know most of you are involved with as well. The economic recovery part in relation to COVID, that brings in my regional development part of my team. So there's a regional development framework that's going to be focusing on that, which will be coming out at some time soon. And that's just how you make contact with us. So you can go through local government questions. But again, we encourage you to talk to us, talk to your regional office, talk to us. Again, I'll just emphasise, talk to us early. If you think there's something you're not sure about, if you think there's something you're worried about as far as compliance goes, we will guarantee that we'll come alongside you. We want to know early. We want to support you. We actually want the system of government to be, local government to be strong. So our aim is to support you to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Maree. Maree's here